With the recent attention that's been brought to it on social media and other outlets, what is your opinion on jazz being labeled as Black American music?
Black American music? Okay, I've spoken on this many times, and I'm happy to speak on this. I don't believe in putting a race term that's inaccurate, like black or white or red or yellow, on music. Because of the prevalence of racism in our country as part of our identity, we look at everything as a color. Music is so porous, and so many things influence our music. This music is American music. Now, it is from the perspective of the Afro-American, but I've never called our music Black music because I don't want somebody else to tell me something is white music. The polarity in the way we look at things affects our understanding. But I'm going to say that we know now that we've discovered the DNA strain that race is a matter of climate, and the DNA tells us how we're all interrelated. But if you've lived in the climate of racism, and you live in that climate, and all of your experiences have been shaped by that racism, how can you undo your experiences to address the scientific facts of your humanity? Jazz deals with all of these issues, and it's very complicated. If you look around our room and you look at just from the standpoint of the race of who's in here, that speaks more to the resources in our country than it does to anything racial. But it's very important for us to address these issues as musicians and to be real, for us to heal ourselves and to get better. If we act like we don't see it or we don't talk about it, there's always going to be a problem. There are many musicians that have played jazz who have been great, not only of different races in America, but at this point all over the world. To reduce a music to a term of racism that applies to a country that holds those values so dear. I don't think that has a history. If a guy called me, I'm just give you an example because this is a relatively complex but very simple question. Because on the one hand, I don't want to disrespect the Afro-American tradition because it is the wellspring and the source of where jazz comes from. However, what degree of black does a person have to be to become black? What degree of white does somebody have to be white? Well, if you're from the South, you grew up in segregation, it's clear. But at this point, let's go out of our culture and think of if you learn Beethoven's music and you say, well, this is some white music, it's Beethoven's music. If you learn tango music, you say, well, this is some white music. If you learn Brazilian music and it's more Sergio Santos, you say, this is black music. These terms become very, not just offensive, they're inaccurate. I always ask people a question, Americans a question. I say, what color do you think Iranians are? And you always say, oh, dark. I say, those people are whiter than you. Well, why are we fighting them? That's the next thought, not the question. Really? I didn't know that. These are very difficult but simple subjects. So for me personally, I don't refer to music in racial terms. There can be a nation attached to it, American. There can be Afro-American music in terms of the tradition of the blues, the tradition of songs. But let's not forget, the root of Afro-American music is Anglo-Celtic music. The Africanization of music exists all across the diaspora. There's so much music all through the world. Middle Eastern music from Spain, everywhere, African diaspora music. Every time you hear a 6 rhythm and a 12 rhythm, it's African music. But in our obsession for race and to define things racially, we have to know exactly who invented this. The DNA told you. We come from Africa, so we're all Africans. So we can all call it just African music. There you go.
Hello, my name is Andrew Stein, and I'm a baritone saxophonist from Middleton High School. And obviously, Joe Temperley is one of my greatest role models. And so my question is, how do you think Joe Temperley's status as an immigrant into American culture affected his ability to play music that was rooted in an immigrant people?
Okay, I like that question. I'm going to turn this answer over to Marcus Prenham. He said, how did Joe Temperley's status? And the reason I'm turning it over to him is because we're having a conversation about Joe Temperley years ago. I don't know if he even remembers it. He said, man, Okay, we're talking. He said, man, there's something how Joe is not even from here. And he's playing our music with a level of seriousness that we're not playing it with. Do you remember that? Yeah, okay, he doesn't remember it. So, you feel comfortable talking about it? Because Marcus really loved Joe with a certain type of intensity, as we all did.
We all love Joe. I had the pleasure of writing a composition for him for a commission we did. And, I was trying to think of what to write. And I tried to write some melodies of my own. And then Joe's spirit came into it. This is like a month after he died. He goes, print up. Just sing something and play it and pretend I'm soloing on it. So I wrote some chord changes out, and I imagined what he would play over the chord changes. And so this song was born from that. And I can't tell you too many stories about Joe, because some of them are, he was a character. Joe kept us laughing. He would tell limericks, which is, how do you describe a limerick? It's like a Scottish...
Something that we won't say now.
Exactly. But he was just soulful. I mean, he just loved our culture. He loved the culture of the United States. And we miss him very much. And his sound just says it all. So just listen to him, and your answer will be given to you just by his sound. That's all I can say about Joe.
Yeah. I want to make the point also with what Marcus was saying, that we love Joe Temple. From a personal standpoint, it's very deep. His music is very personal. I talked to Joe right before he passed away. I sat down with him on this couch. We talked for, 2 hours. And he was so sick. And then I got up to go to the door, and just him trying to get up out of his couch. Man, it was so heavy just to look at him. And he got down in there, and he stood up. He walked over to me. He hugged me. I hugged him. And we looked at each other. And it's something in our music. It's very deep, and it's very profound. It's intensely human. And it's not a joke. Joe Temple gave his life to that. And he was so for real about it. It was in his sound and every note he played. And I was telling y'all that many of the roots of Afro-American music and of American music are Anglo-Celtic. They come from all over the world. Everything comes from African music. Joe Temple understood that. And he embodied the music. Joe would call before we had some real part. He'd say, Wynton, send me my part. I want to make sure that I'm ready. Don't tell anybody. Nice that I could tell everybody. Joe would practice at work and share it on his part. And, we loved him. And in speaking of Joe, his spirit is always with us. We talk about, Ryan and I used to joke about Joe's changes. We'd be playing a certain song, and Joe would play some type of melodic phrase or something that would go through whatever the changes were. He'd say, Joe's changes. And I want to also recognize Paul Netzello, who came in a very difficult position in the band. As a young person, plays with a tremendous amount of integrity and style and feeling, has his way of playing, and he's continued in that tradition. And he's continued with the spirit of Joe, embracing Joe, playing his own way, and always having the ultimate respect, reverence, without making that reverence and all that's necessary to be respectful overwhelm his own style and sound and ambitions. So I know we're going on long and about that, but Joe Temple was something. He was absolutely for real on so many levels. I wish I could get deeper than that, but we love this man.